Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Dieter Melhorn Fishing Podcast. I hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be listening to the show. Today, we've got a guest on the show, Captain Jaime Hughes. She is a fishing guide, charter captain up in Pennsylvania, and I think she's only my second female guest that I've had on here, so that's pretty cool. There's a lot more female captains in the saltwater world. You get some trout guides, but having a freshwater female captain that is guiding, that's kind of cool. It's really cool that she specializes in catching catfish. She fishes for some other stuff up there, but yeah, she's got some cool stories. We get into her background, some of the cool guiding stories, not so cool things that go on with turds in the river. You'll just have to stick around to see what that's about. But yeah, it's an interesting podcast. Had a great time with her, and I'll give you some contact information. If you're up in the Northeast and want to book a trip with her, I'll have contact information down in the contact section. Or if you're listening to the podcast, just hit me up. Go to my website, DieterMelhornFishing.com. Go to the contact section. If you have trouble finding her, I'll put you in touch with her in case you're interested in booking a trip. To all the regular listeners, welcome back. I appreciate you checking it out. And if you're new, thanks for stopping by. That last little bit of information is for you new guys. If you want to give a comment, give some ideas, give some feedback, just go to the website. There's a contact section there, DieterMelhornFishing.com. And if you're interested in a guided trip with me, I'm a charter captain here in the Carolinas, outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. There's contact information there. You can reach out to me and hit me up. But for now, let's jump into the podcast with Captain Jaime Hughes. So tell me about the area that you live in, where you're at. Paint a picture for the rest of the world about your little corner of America.
All right. So I guess it could be described as central Pennsylvania. We've got the Susquehanna River. We've got a bunch of little lakes. Most of our lakes are electric only. There's not many unlimited horsepower lakes around here, but the river is kind of a free-for-all. The river's really shallow, so a lot of people around here, including myself, run jet boats. This is kind of a unique place to live, especially where I'm at, because we've got access to several major highways within minutes, but then an hour away, you can be in Amish country in Lancaster. A couple hours, you can be in New Jersey. So it's kind of a neat place to live. You can kind of be anywhere you want if you don't feel like being here pretty easily.
Now, what made you decide to be a fishing guide? Take us back before the fishing guide, as far as like family fishing, fishing with parents, fishing with uncles, fishing with cousins, aunts, whatever. What's your backstory there on how you got started just into the whole fishing world? Because let's face it, the elephant in the room is you are a girl, and there's not that many girl guides out there, especially in fresh. There's a lot more in saltwater than there are in freshwater. So, yeah, tell us that backstory, how you got interested.
Well, so really good family friend, Dave. Dave and my dad and I, we would spend a lot of nights, beside the river catching catfish. Back then, it was strictly channel cats. Flatheads weren't really a topic yet, but more on that later, maybe. But I'm 42, and so we're talking, 30 plus years ago. I was spending way too late of nights with my dad next to the river, making mom mad. We'd come home late on school nights, smelling bad. Buckets of fish. But that's kind of how I got started. I also fished with my grandpa too. I don't know, maybe my dad wanted a boy, but he was happy with me and happy to take me out there with him. And I loved every second of it. And then as I got older, it's kind of funny. He got less and less interested in it, and I kind of ran with it. And it's become my passion. Absolutely.
That's cool. Now, you're a licensed captain. And I was reading on your website, the waters you fish are not actually considered navigable waters, and you really don't have to be one, but you decided to go that route. What made you decide to do that, make that jump? That's a pretty big jump, something to do that you really don't have to do. There's a lot of guides out there, as I call riding dirty, that don't have a captain's license when maybe they should. What made you decide to make that jump?
Well, couple things. One, I thought it would be nice to have, and I'm one of those people that just kind of likes to further my education and get as much experience as I can, learn as much as I can. I've always got my nose in something, trying to read up and learn up on it. So for me, it was just kind of I wanted to do it for a personal goal. But also, once I got into it, once I realized how much more education, on water experience, because I went for my full endorsements, which are definitely not necessary for what I'm doing. None of this is. It just made me such a more knowledgeable boater, and the experience, I know that can benefit my clients, and just, I don't know, everybody feels a little bit more comfortable, I think, if you're going out with a captain as opposed to someone that could have, bought a boat a year ago, taken a boater safety course online, and spend $100 on a guide permit. I mean, there's a lot of fantastic guides out there that are not captains. I am not knocking, anyone for following their passion, but I will say that, I encourage people to get their captain's license because it's such a cool experience. And you're one, right, Dieter? You're a captain.
Yep. I went through the whole Sea School program and everything a few years ago and did it. So yeah. Well, that's cool. Take me back to your first guide trip. Do you remember your first guide trip? Well, let me put it this way. Most of us start out taking out like taking out friends, family. That's like social media. That doesn't count. What was your first guide trip with like somebody who you don't know and you hired? We've all got that one.
Fantastic story. So my first guide trip, I had already done the practice thing, friends, family, that sort of thing. And my first pay trip, I'm at the ramp. I'm excited, but I'm still a little bit nervous because now everything really counts. You got to get these people fish. You got to do the thing. And I had my bucket of fish, bait fish, and one of the fish commission guys comes down the ramp and he says, "Hey, are you a guide?" And I said, yes, I am. And he's like, "What you got in the bucket?" And I said, "Well, they're bluegills." He said, "Well, how many do you have?" And I said, "Oh, a lot." And he said, "How many?" And I said, "I think around 40. And he goes, "You think around 40? And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you can only have 50. And I said, "Why? I don't have 50, but I have, around 40. He said, "Well, I'm gonna need to check that." So my first trip, before we even left the launch, I literally had my bait fish counted by the fish commission officer. And I in fact had 40 fish, by the way. I was well within the limit, but that was definitely an unnecessary start to my first trip, and it kind of set the stage. But hey, after that, we were good to go. It went great.
Now, that's a good, interesting topic there. I've done plenty of videos on different catfish baits and using bait. Obviously, y'all can use game fish. What are y'all's restrictions up there on doing that?
So 50 is how many you're allowed to have on your person in your container per licensed angler. But like if you and I were fishing, you had your Pennsylvania fishing license, I have mine, you could have 50 in your container, I could have 50 in mine. But that's kind of the way that works. And the way it's written in the rule book is any legally taken, legal sized game fish can be used as a bait fish. There are some restrictions, but anyone that's ever got their hands on a Pennsylvania Fish Commission, fishing handbook, the thing is, I mean, there's a lot of information in it, but they can be tricky to read and not contradicting, but just tricky. One page will say one thing. We've got certain lakes that have bass restrictions that other lakes don't, so it's not statewide rules. It's really important to read that book, or else you could get yourself in trouble and be totally ignorant.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way ours is. As long as it meets creel and length limits, you can use it. And in North Carolina anyway, I straddle the line. One of the lakes I fish is in North Carolina and South Carolina. South Carolina is the total opposite. You can't use any game fish except for bluegill as bait. So depending on which side of this river channel you're on, it dictates what you're able to use for bait. So yeah, it's kind of tricky and funky there. What is y'all's season like up there as far as when you can fish? Because obviously you're further north than where I'm at in the Carolinas. Take us through like the whole seasonal cycle up there from when you can start fishing all the way until, I don't know, does it ice over or just get too cold and miserable to fish?
Well, this past winter, there was hardly any ice to speak of. I'm a really avid ice fisherman, so that made me really sad. This was a tough winter for that. But the river rarely ices over. You could go out on the river almost year round. You'd have to be really safe, and there can sometimes be ice chunks and things and slush that can be really dangerous. I'm actually only a guide 6 months out of the year. I kind of live my life on a 6 and 6 schedule. I have another job I do the other 6 months out of the year. So for me personally, I'm on the water from April till the end of September. Sometimes I get an early start. Sometimes I stay out a little bit later, but my other job takes a lot of my time. I'm also very passionate about it. But there are people that will fish the river year round. Our local lakes on a typical winter will freeze over enough that I can get out and do some ice fishing. So ice overs are not a guarantee, but it's always a hope on my end. This winter it didn't happen.
What are your water temperatures like right now? We're sitting here taping this. We're at the end of April. I was out today. We're sitting at 65-degree water, and that was on a cloudy, rainy day, so it's holding overnight in that temperature range. Where are y'all at temperature-wise right now at the end of April?
Yeah, so I was out last night actually, and I was getting about 59. It was teetering between 59 and 60. We have a warm water plant that, a discharge plant, and that water, I was hoping it was going to warm it up a little bit, but it wasn't. They kind of dumped down the temps there. They were killing some fish with having some pretty big temperature changes, so they dumped down the temperature, and that's just not running as hot. So it was teetering between 59 and 60, but that's the warmest I've seen so far.
Cool. Now, what's the Susquehanna like? Because I've never been on it. I've heard of it. I can barely pronounce it. What is that river like? Give a description. I mean, around here, our rivers, I'm on the Catawba River chain. Not a super big river. It's not the Tennessee River. It's not the Ohio. It's nothing like that. But it's also not filled with rocks. Give us a description of what that whole river system is like there, and if there's any lakes, reservoirs on it, and all this will make sense once I start asking some other stuff about it.
So the Susquehanna, by the way, it's Hannah.
Hana. Oh, okay.
I should have just let you keep going. It was kind of cute, but
There we go.
the Susquehanna River is enormous. Okay, it's a very long river. It's a very wide river. In some spots, it's over a mile wide, pushing 2 miles wide. I mean, it is a huge river. I had a guy come up and fish with me from Miami, and there's no shortage of water down there. And he said that when he drove across the river, he was just dumbfounded by how enormous this body of water was. Now, it's wide in spots, but there are spots that you could literally walk the whole way across this river without getting your knees wet. Okay, I mean, it is very, very shallow in spots. And then on some of the bigger pools where the dams are, like especially down at the Maryland border, there are places that are wickedly deep. But, on average for a trip, I'm fishing anywhere from 2 feet to 20 feet of water, and that's it. And 20 is hard to find in a lot of spots. A lot of spots you're fishing 15 max. It's a very shallow river.
Now, how do you fish this? I mean, there's obviously for new people listening, there's different ways to fish river. There's park and pray, as I call it, throw it an anchor and hope you're in the right spot. There's bottom bouncing. There's some people that do upstream trolling and all that. What's kind of your technique or techniques for fishing on this river?
Yeah, so my favorite technique is, I have humminbird. I'm a humminbird fan, so I'm gonna check my electronics. I'm gonna look at the different structures, see if there's any bait, hanging out in there. I'm gonna stop there. The name of my business is BreakLine Charters. I chose that name because a break line is a terminology used in fishing to describe a change in structure, a change in water color, a change in current, something like that. So I'm going to typically look for break lines, going to look for bait stacked up and anchor up and fish there. That's my favorite way to fish. If it's windy, sometimes having a big flat bottom boat like I do, that back end can swing around. I am not a fan of dropping two anchors, just from a safety standpoint. So I'll put drift socks out to help keep the back end nice and straight. If we do have a steep upriver wind and I'm having trouble with boat control, um, sometimes you just got to think outside of the box. So, if for those that know what bumping is, we kind of do that, but without the trolling motor. I'll just let the wind just take us right up the river, hand everybody a rod, stick a few in the holders, and just hope for the best. And it's amazing, how good that can be. It's definitely not ideal. It's a lot more work for me. I lose so much gear, but it's sometimes what you got to do.
So when you park and pray, anchor on the spot. Well, I always get this question on guide trips, and it's always talk amongst guide and fishermen in general. How long do you give it? What's your kind of mentality? Some people are using the boiled egg timer, and they start the timer, and the time it takes to, boil an egg, they're moving. Some people are. I've got a buddy, Chris Simpson, a captain that I fish tournaments with, and there's some places we fish where it's 90 minutes period before he moves, and he ain't moving until then. What's your tactic on all that?
So, so the way I do it is I have a 1 hour rule. That's an hour with nothing. Okay, that's if it's an hour of dead time. But that timer kind of resets every time we get a bite. And I don't know, if it's really slow, like light bites within that hour, and a couple hours have gone by, I'll pick up and move. But I am not someone that moves constantly. I feel like, I don't know, like you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. You can sit in one spot all night and something might happen, or you can move 10 times in a 5 hour period and just be chasing them around and not get into them either. On a 5 hour trip, a slow bite, the most I'll move is about 5 times. I love the nights though, whenever you can just set up and sit there all night and just hammer them.
And that's always my internal debate. I like to catch fish. I like to have rod spin, but I also know that, like you were saying, sometimes you're better off just waiting. Sometimes you're in the right place at the wrong time, and waiting will work it out. Now, you said if you get bit at, let's say, the 45-minute mark, are you resetting your timer to another hour, or is it another 15, 20 minutes, or?
I mean, it depends. Like if the bait's been out there for 45 minutes, in that scenario, I think what I would do if we had a good hard hit at the 45-minute mark, I would probably check that bait, and at the same time, I'd check all the others, throw fresh bait out there, and yeah, I would probably start that timer for another hour. I mean, that's just how I do it. Now, every trip's a little bit different. You have people that sometimes don't care what they catch. If people just want channel cats, I'm not saying channel cats are like super duper easy, but they're a lot easier than flatheads. So, if somebody just wants to put fish in the boat, period, that's different. I might change the way that time frame works and everything, but for flatheads, yeah, I'm usually resetting for an hour.
Now, do you literally use the timer that is like on your phone? Because I do. And anybody that's been on a guide trip with me knows I am maniacal about the time, because what'll happen is I'll 5 minute to death. Another 5 minutes. And I always challenge people. I'll start the timer and I'll go, how long have we been sitting here? Nobody, we've been here a half hour. We've been here 15 minutes. Nobody ever gets it right. I am maniacal about it. Anybody that's been on a guide trip, y'all can chime in the comment section, know that I will literally go, we got 2 minutes left. We got a minute left. We got 48 seconds left. Do you actually time it, or are you a little more?
Oh no, I absolutely time it. I do mine on here though. So I've got a timer on here, and people usually know it's time to go because I just like jump up and I'm like, well, okay, time's up, because my watch is going bzz, bzz, bzz on my arm. But yeah, I time it too.
Well, that's good. I'm glad somebody's as maniacal as I am. Now, another thing I noticed that's somewhat similar to our trips, I saw that you do 5 hour trips. And I do 6 hour trips. And my thinking on it has been, I tried the half day thing. I've had people pay me to go longer, and I have offered that up to people that may be from out of town, want to fish late at night, and they'll just, do extra. But 6 hours seems like a time for most people, and I think it depends on your clients, that one, they're they get a lot of fishing in. You know, that 5-6 hour range is a lot of fishing, a lot of time on the water, and you know, I jokingly say too, it's about as long as most people can go without going to the bathroom if they're nervous about that. So, what is your mentality on that time frame, and what have you found? What's kind of your thinking? Because I'm interested to hear that.
I started with 4 hour trips, and it just wasn't enough time. That was not enough time, so I upped it to 5. 5 is my most commonly booked trip, especially for people when it's their first time out with me. But I do have some people that quickly realize how fast 5 hours can go. So I offer a combo trip too, because I offer an afternoon 5 hour and a night 5 hour, or you can put them together and do a combo. So, you know, I do have a few different trip options. The combo is far less popular for newbies, but people that have fished with me 2 or 3 times that might want to do a combo and kind of do half for smallmouth bass and half for catfish, that's a pretty popular trip. And we can take a potty break halfway, so that's good.
And that's an interesting thing in all seriousness on the potty break thing on boats when you're a charter. It's one thing when you're out there with friends, but when you're a charter captain, it's always I give them basically the spiel, especially when there's a lady on the boat. It's a different scenario than it's a bunch of guys, and I always give them the rundown on what the options are. And so yeah, that's a good thing. Do y'all actually have restrooms there at any of the boat ramps? Ours, we have these nasty concrete porta-johns that they're basically, it looks like a nice pretty building, and you think, oh, this is going to be a nice bathroom with a toilet and a sink, but it's nothing but a concrete porta-john. I know it's a crazy topic, but it always interests me around the country and what the options are for this stuff. What's it like up there in y'all's world for that?
Which is different. We have private launches, we have park launches, we have state launches. Ironically, one of the nicest launches around here doesn't have porta potties, so I would love to run trips there, but it just doesn't make sense, especially like you said, for women. I mean, first thing you do when you get off the boat, usually after being out for that long, is go to the bathroom. So I like to have a place where people can do that. I'm very fortunate right now. The ramp that I use is actually a private launch. I pay a little bit of money. The owner's super nice. They're always looking out for me, my well-being, my truck, like everything's safe. So grateful for that spot because I have had issues in the past at some public launches, as have other guides. So I'm very thankful for that. And yes, at our launch, we do have a porta potty. It's nothing fancy, but we have.
So this is the crazy talk people don't usually get when you're guides actually talk about this stuff. It's like, hey, you're fishing this lake, you know, this is kind of crap we have to worry about when you're trying to figure this stuff out. What's a trip like? All right, we're take me through a trip. Mine typically I start right before daylight. Mainly because the lake that I fish predominantly, especially as it gets warmer, has a tremendous amount of recreational boat traffic. I try to get people off the water by noon because it turns into a crap show out there with jet boats and ski boats. And I don't know if y'all have that kind of stuff there, but what's your day like? Take us through a trip. We're going fishing tomorrow. Give me the spiel. I'm on the phone with you. Hey, Jamie, what's going on? What are we doing?
So if you're doing a nighttime trip with me, because that's going to be the most popular, we're going to meet at 7:30. You're going to park up at the public park. I'm going to walk up and meet you. We'll say our hellos, and then we're going to walk down to my boat together. Once we're at the boat, I'm going to go over all the safety procedures, kind of have you put eyes on everything. I want everybody to be familiar with the boat in the daylight because very soon it will be dark out there. So I like everybody to be comfortable and familiar with their surroundings. Like I said, we go over some safety things, and then we shove off.
Very cool. Now, are you you fish for multiple species, right? I mean, I know you from the catfish world, but I saw some stuff on your website. There's some other fish that you can catch up there. How does that play in to a trip? Are people booking you just to go for one species, or they just want a good fun time on the water?
So the nighttime trip, yeah, those people just want catfish, period. I mean, yeah, you could catch some other fish at night, but we're targeting cats at night. The afternoon trip, our river's pretty cool. I mean, it's got muskie in it, walleye, not a lot of either, but it's got them. It's got tons of smallmouth bass. We've got carp. Pretty neat river. Lots of versatility there as far as species. And I always say the best way to catch a walleye or a muskie is to not target them. Book a smallmouth trip. Just go for smallmouth, and catch a muskie. It's crazy how that works. We've caught so many muskie over the years on smallmouth lures like this big, an 8-pound test. It's wild. But yeah, so we'll target multiple species. It's pretty fun. I like those trips. Keeps it exciting.
Very cool. Now, how far are you? Because there'll be some people will be watching it. A lot of my people that go with me are like, "Oh, I'm going to Myrtle Beach, Santee Cooper, or Charlotte for a ball game, whatever." What are you kind of near? You went over it at the beginning, but if somebody's looking, hey, wouldn't mind fishing with her. I'm going to be. I mean, I don't know Pennsylvania. I know where Allentown is. I know where Philadelphia is, and those are two
I'm
different
not
worlds
near either of
apart.
those places.
Okay, what's that? If what's going to be an area they may be traveling to or going to, or do you get people? Are you more of a destination like to come there to fish with you? Some people are. It's like you were at Santee Cooper recently, and
Yes.
that's kind of you have to kind of be going there to go there because it's not really close to anything. What's your place like? And along those same lines, where do you get most of your clients from, and what are your clients like that find you and fish with you there?
Boy, that's very broad. Okay, so I
Yep.
have, well, first I'll say I have a lot of people that come from up north, like New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine. I've had a lot of northern US people because where I'm at, located geographically, is kind of the northernmost point that you're going to get into flatheads commonly. And if those people want flathead catfish and don't want to have to go any further than they need to, I'm kind of their girl. So I get a lot of people from up north. When I was at CatCon and spoke down there, which was a really cool experience. It's actually when we met Dieter, which was really cool.
Yep.
Back in 2020, I had a few people that attended my seminar that ended up booking trips with me that lived, down there, which was really cool. I've had people from all over the world, actually. I had a guy from Slovakia. I've had people from China, Poland, because I get a lot of global businesses that have like global team meetings and, team, I don't know, building experiences, and they'll book a trip for that. So I've had a lot of really cool people from all over on the boat, but I get a lot of locals too. A lot of people that just don't have access to a boat. A lot of bank fishing access has been revoked due to vandalism and litter and unruliness and things like that. My boat also can accommodate wheelchairs and other assistance devices for people that may need that. It's very wide, comfortable, and stable. So people that may need special access, have the ability to fish with me. So I get some folks from that venue as well.
Very cool. We'll shift gears a little bit into a little on the conservation end. What is the state of your fishery? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of places, Ohio River, that, I hear gets pounded by people taking the fish out, going to pay lakes with them. There are other areas that water quality issues have impacted, spawning, that kind of thing. Some places overfish, some places are growing. I'll be honest with you. I'm blessed where I'm at, the waters I fish. We're on that upward climb, maybe close to a plateau with the growth and, the spread of fish. What's the health of the fishery that you're in right there?
Boy, that's a controversial topic, isn't it?
That's what I'm here for, and that's why.
Oh, man. All right. Okay. All right. No comment? Is that what you're supposed to say in a case like this? Okay. Well, boy.
The thing is here,
Okay.
the honesty on a lot of this stuff is needed. I mean, let's just face it, without stomping on somebody's throat about it. The biggest thing, and in all of this is usually there's a lot of stakeholders that are involved. We just see this from our perspective as a catfish angler or a muskie angler, but we all want 40-pound flatheads and 50-pound blues, but there's a crappie fisherman and a bass fisherman that are saying we need to kill all those flatheads and blues because they're eating all of our fish. They're eating all of our bass. They're eating all. So there's all these stakeholders involved, and there's got to be a balance, and that's what God bless the biologists because they're the ones that are in the middle. They're getting pulled in all different directions on all this stuff, and granted, some stuff gets overlooked, and I think that's enough tap dancing on my part to give you a chance to formulate a good politically correct statement here.
All right, here we go. So I'm either going to be liked or hated after this. So our river has a big problem, and it's not. It's really gross to talk about, actually, and there's a lot of articles and facts and science that backs this up. So this is not just fishing guide Jamie, pretending she's smart here or something like that. All right, we have a sewage problem in our river. I'm talking raw human sewage. So also after this, no one's going to want to book a trip with me. I realize that, but hey, you want facts? Here they are. There's actually some placards and things at some of our launches that say not to use the areas for recreational use, as far as swimming, dogs, things like that. The big issue is a lot of our sewage treatment plants that are supposed to clean before they dump into the river are not up to capacity to handle what they need to. And when we get torrential downpours or they get up too full, basically, they're going to dump. And one day I was out wading, and I heard this alarm go off. And I was like, what is that? That's really strange. And next thing I know, I kid you not, I was waist deep in turds. It was absolutely foul. Toilet paper, all of it just got dumped right into the river. I found
So
out
is this coming out of a waste treatment plant that just had like an overflow discharge? Oops, and it just happens.
Not an oops, not an oops. There's more to it. So after further research and making some calls and things, I found out that the state is aware of this, and they do pay their fine, and there are timed releases. And I guess what it comes down to is it costs a lot less money to build these places up to capacity than it does to pay that fine. And of course, you have your farm fertilizer runoff and that sort of thing. But our Susquehanna River keeper, he's actually worked a lot with biologists and things. And like I said, there's articles you can check on this stuff. But basically, when they did some testing on some water samples taken around the city, where a lot of the city discharges and downriver from those sewage treatment plants, the way it came out was it was testing at third world country levels as far as fecal bacterial levels. There's a lot that needs to be done to our river to get it to a point where I would feel comfortable telling someone to eat fish. And there's plenty of people that eat fish, and more power to them. That's great. I'll just stop and get a cheeseburger someplace. I'm not eating fish out of our river. Knowing what I know, seeing what I've seen, it's really, really a shame, because to look at it, it's a beautiful river. And when I have people that book me from, out of state, upstate, that know how pristine it is and the smallie fishing and everything, it's not. It's actually pretty disgusting, and not disgusting like a lot of polluted rivers. I'll have a lot of people ask me if they can keep their fish, and I'm like, no, we're all catch and release. And I said, because our river's pretty dirty, just hoping that's enough, that I don't have to get into it. And some people push the issue, and they're like, oh no, that's fine, all rivers are dirty, my river's dirty too. All I gotta do is send them a few articles, and they're like, yeah, yep, we're good, thanks, yep, we don't need to keep any.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because, I listen to, it's funny, a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are saltwater shows, a lot of them based out of Florida. It's one of the biggest complaints you hear out of the captains in Florida, South Florida, is the water quality. Everything that's done there because of the rapid growth in Florida, the runoff from fertilizer and everything else that goes on in the stuff in the Everglades. And I've always said that while pay lakes can have an impact, I think our biggest threat to our fisheries is going to be water quality, because all you need is for something to go wrong in that whole ecosystem and to screw up the spawning areas, you go back to the bald eagles back in the 70s, whatever pesticides they were using that were making the eggs too soft, and the eggs were getting crushed by the eagle, and that's why we almost lost the bald eagle. Something like that could happen very easily with a bunch of crap in the water, like you're saying. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. Does anybody give a crap at the government level, or is a lot of this just passed off, sloughed off to the next person?
That was what happened to me. My personal experience was easily 10 years ago at this point. And the water tests that I'm referring to were done within the last few years. So I don't know that anything has changed. I don't work in that department. I hear things, I see things, I talk to people, but it's hate to say it this way, but it's not my job to know that. I wish I did. I can only have so much influence. Talking about it, I would help hopes, hope helps, but I don't know. I don't know if anything's being done. I feel like, as long as there's money to be made by these fines getting paid, I don't know.
No, and honestly, a lot of times that's what it is. It's cheaper to pay to fine than it is to fix the problem. And, it's almost like it's almost like for a lot of these places, it's just the cost to play. It's what it is. So what is your future with the guide business? What are you looking to do? Are you kind of on the path you want to be on? Are you looking to expand this? What's kind of your thinking? You've been at it, since 2011?
Yeah,
I think I saw that on the website. Right? I think I saw that on the website.
10 kind of got everything, the seed planted, worked on the business name and all that. And 11, everything, I started running my, first trips for hire for everything. So I'd say it was kind of like a 10-11 crossover kind of deal. And how I got started is kind of a neat story. I don't know if we have time for it, but it is kind of entertaining.
We got all the time in the world. Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
All right. So my old bass tournament partner, Doug, and I, we actually started a bank fishing club. And it was called Catfish Fridays. And it was every Friday night all summer long. And it was free. Like, people could just come out and, they'd have to let me know. All right. And then they'd let me know they were coming. And I had a bunch of gear I got at yard sales and chairs. And it was all just junk, like literal junk. Nothing fancy like what we have to fish with now. But it worked, and people would come out and they'd bring their families. Like I said, it was free. And we'd kind of take over the bank and fish. And when we were done, I'd clean everything up, throw all the trash in the back of the car, and we'd do it again. And these events were really fun, and people would learn how to cast and learn about fish. And I've always kind of been one of those, like, I like education, and being able to help teach people how to do these things was really fulfilling for me. And I really enjoyed these. And people wanted me to take them out on my bass boat a lot, but I was like, no catfish on that, not with people out there, because it's a bass boat, right? Right. And so I wasn't taking people out on the bass boat for cats. But there was one night where everything wrapped up and we cleaned up, and it was just a night like any other. I had all the garbage in the back of the car. And the next day, or maybe it was 2 days later, but I got a phone call from the Fish Commission. And I know they're not going to like me telling this story, because I talked to the one guy over there and he's like, that's not how we do things. I'm sorry that happened, but I'm not, because it got me where I am. So anyhow, I put all this garbage in the back of the car. A couple days later, I get a phone call from the Fish Commission, and they're like, hey, we understand you're getting paid to teach people how to fish or something. I forget how they worded it. And I was like, oh, no, it's free. It's totally free. People just let me know they're coming, and I supply all this stuff for them, and they fish and they go home. Like, that's it. This is back in 2008 and 2009, And he's like, no, payment can be in any form. It doesn't have to be money. And I was like, no, I didn't take anything. Like, I really didn't. I mean, I didn't know what the heck they were getting at on the phone. And they're like pushing and pressuring me and, trying to get me to confess. And I'm like, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't take anything. This is a free offering. We just go out, we have fun. I don't leave any messes. Like, what do you want me to say here? I said, just tell me, what's the deal? And they said, cheese balls. I said, what? And they're like, yeah, somebody said that you took some food back with you, that they were cheese balls, and that is a form of payment. So you got to know, it was hard to even contain myself.
Cheese balls. Like
cheese balls.
Like cheese
the big barrel, big plastic barrel of cheese balls, right? So I'm trying to contain myself and be, polite and everything. And I said, wow. I said, well, those cheese balls were garbage. I said, we had passed them up and down the shoreline with chicken liver fingers, shrimp fingers, so many hands in those cheese balls. I'm surprised we're all still alive from eating said cheese balls. But I said, I guarantee you, I did not keep the cheese balls. They were thrown away like all of the other stuff, And they're like, well, that is accepting a form of payment, because it was reported to us. So obviously someone didn't like the fact that I was doing that for people, and they reported me. So I said to the guy on the phone, I said, all right, so where do we go from here? Am I getting fined? Am I going to lose my license because I took home the trash cheese balls? What are we going to do here? And he said, well, if you want to continue to do this and accept forms of payment, then you're going to have to, get a guide permit. And I said, okay, I'll look into that. And here I sit 13 years later. So cheese balls.
So I want to hear about the rules of the boat. There was you had a good story on Facebook, so it was all public. So there's no inside information. You got some good rules. Some people I've got. I don't really. I've got a few rules. I don't have mine. Is just releasing fish. I don't get too specific on stuff. But you do list one about alcohol, and I've had people ask about that on my boat. I don't have a problem with it. I've had a couple of people, but not many people have. I thought there would be, and I think it's because of the guide clients that I get. I get a different crowd. I've got buddies that are guides in different places, and I think depending on where you get your clients from, you get a different type of client. I've got people that get them from a lot of them from like the magazine. That's the big thing for a lot of guides is to, take sports writers out fishing, and you get a certain type of people that come from those. You get a certain type of people that find your name in a travel and tourism magazine. That's a whole different clique. I get 94% of mine from YouTube. They know me from YouTube. They kind of know my shtick. It's why a lot of them don't keep fish. Rarely do people keep fish on my trips. The alcohol thing, I hardly have anybody that ever drinks on the boat. It's very rare. Do you have any stories attached to that, or anybody that's drowned or fell out of the boat or anything else? That's obviously mentioned for a reason. So I'm curious what the backstory is on
All
that.
right. Okay. Well, I've always said, before I became a captain, when I had my first insurance policy as a guide, they said I could have alcohol, but I'd have to have people sign a waiver. So now with the current insurance company, I guess they assume, once you're a captain, you're going to be able to be responsible for people and, cutoffs and things like that. So I always had kind of like a alcohol warning on the website, but it has gotten a little bit more in depth and elaborate since last season, because there was an incident, and in over a decade of guiding, it was my first group to be officially banned, never welcomed back to BreakLine. So you want to hear the story?
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, people always ask me on guide trips. When I've got people that have been with guides, I always ask them, "What's your best guide story? What's the nightmare guide?" And they'll always ask me, "What's your?" They'll ask me, "What's your worst?" And I've been lucky. My worst trip was just a guy that was horribly quiet, and on top of that, the fishing was bad. It was really slow. And it was one of those where I would say, "Hey, what kind of work do you do?" "I'm a plumber." "Oh, okay, my turn to talk." And I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" "Raleigh." "Oh, it's my turn to talk again." I had one of those. It was just, but that's not bad. I mean, that's yours. It's awkward. Yours, I think, was awkward plus. So, yeah, give us that one. Give us your worst guide client story.
Well, these guys definitely win the worst, and I'm not going to use names. So I'm not going to take it that far.
Absolutely not. No names. No names.
It was a group of guys, and they had actually booked me before, and one of the guys on the trip was inappropriate and drank a lot. Now, look, first you got to know I'm pretty easy to get along with. Anyone that's met me knows I can, joke around with the guys, like put up with a lot before I get, like, it takes very, very much to upset me or get me shook up at all. All right. But this guy, let's put it this way. If some of my good guy friends are around and he was acting like that, they'd probably beat him. All right. This guy was really out of line. And I just asked him to stop over and over and over. And eventually he actually went to sleep. So it stopped. But this guy, I don't know if it was just the alcohol or if he was having some kind of prescription drug interaction, but he was really a mess. So I told this group of guys, like, look, because otherwise they were fun. They were great guys. Okay. And that's why this story kind of sucks. But I told them, like, look, if you guys ever want to book me again, you got to keep him in check. All right. I am not going to put up with this again. I didn't like it. It was not fun for me. You cannot let that happen again, but I'll give you another try if you promise that. And they're like, oh, okay. So last year came around and they booked me again. And I said, hey, you don't remember what I said? Like, oh, okay. Yep, we got you. So this group of guys comes walking down the ramp, and we'll call him the problem child. He was already drunk. He showed up intoxicated and or medicated. I don't know which, but he was not 100%. Let's put it that way. And he's like, do you remember me? And I'm like, yep, I remember you. And I said to the guys, I said, look, you're going to keep him in check, right? And they're like, absolutely. I was like, all right. So he gets on the boat. Everybody's on the boat. We shove off. Now this is a combo trip. So we're doing bass for the first half. So their hands are full. They're casting. They're eating, drinking a little bit, but that's it. Mostly casting and catching bass. So their hands are pretty busy. And then when it was time to switch for catfish, I put the bass rods, which they're pretty valuable, in the side, horizontal side rod holders on the boat. And got all the catfish rods out and started catfishing. And the guy that was inappropriate the year before started to pick up his old habits and would like say things that were not okay, grab. It really sucked. All right, let's put it that way. So I was like, look, this has got to stop or else we're going back. And I think everybody realized I wasn't messing around. So it did stop for a while. And then another one of them puked. So there was puke in the boat. I dealt with that.
At this point, you've got them puking, just being regular assholes. I'll just say it. It's my podcast. And you know, I'll be honest. It's if it was a guy, I don't think it would have been that way. But you got some guys who are being teetotal assholes, and yeah. So how did this end?
So that was the end of that trip. Got them back to shore. I didn't want to egg the situation on. I didn't want to put myself in any kind of danger by kind of reading them the riot act or getting all ticked off at the ramp. I was very calm and collected, said good night, goodbye, get home safely. It was that night, that drive back, man, I'll tell you what, I had so many things going through my head. It really messed me up. I mean, it wasn't just like, we can look back on this now, you know, a year or so later, and it's like, you know, it happened, whatever, it's in the past. But I'll tell you what, being in that situation was really uncomfortable. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. I'm sure it wouldn't have happened to me if I was a guy. Could I have put the brakes on the situation sooner? Yes. Should I have maybe not even taken them out again after the prior year's behavior? Probably yes to that too. But yeah, so the next day after I kind of wrapped my head around how I was going to word it, I sent them an email. And they're not all bad. That's the thing. Like I said, I a lot of bad things happened on the boat that night that makes them not welcome back. But I do know these guys do have some good in them. And it's really just a shame that that's how they chose to behave on my boat. And never again, they're not allowed. And it also has changed how I write out the alcohol rules. And it's also changed me, as a guide.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not putting up with it anymore.
Yeah.
If people are going to
I mean, that's somebody with a drinking problem. And, I have nothing against people. They can drink on my boat. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But when you get to the point, and this is true, not just on a guide trip, it's anywhere in life. When you lose control of your decision making, you've got a problem. But that's a whole nother story for another day. What's your best guide trip? What's the one that sticks out that if God said you can gamble on the rest of your trips being good, or you can have one like this for the rest of your journey? What's like one that sticks out? I know you probably had a ton of good ones. What's one that sticks out? And it doesn't have to be about fish. It can be about a rewarding experience. I had a guy on the boat last week that was blind. Him and his wife came out, and it was very rewarding having him on the boat. We luckily caught some great fish, and but it was a very insightful trip. Just learning some about his perspective and everything. So, is there anything that really sticks out to you? Just like you get back in the car and you just sit down and you go, "By God, that's why I do this. That was cool. That was cool. That was a cool trip," and you're like pumped about it.
Well, there is, and I kind of feel like I'd be copying if I told you what it is now, because the story you just told me, it's almost ironic.
Well,
No,
it's not like it's little floats in a jar
yeah.
to see how much they'll hold, how much weight they'll hold up or
Come
anything.
on.
That's totally different. So I'll tell all of y'all that story here in just a minute on that one. But first, let's hear your story. This will be interesting.
All right, so I told the guys from Catch the Fever down there at Santee this story, and I actually teared up. So I'm gonna do my best to keep composed here, but this is really, really special, and this has nothing to do with big fish, and that's the thing. Like, I'm a guide, it's my job to put people on fish, but I think it's also my job to show people a good time, make sure they're safe and comfortable, and make memories. One saying I say all the time is, it's not the size of the fish, it's the size of the memories. And in this case, this is one of my biggest memories as a guide. So I had a child out that would be blind. He was losing his vision, and he did not, he basically couldn't see anything that was not very big and pretty much right in his face. His dad wanted to book a catfish trip, and most of those are at night for me. But he wanted to go during the day, so his son could see the fish really well and everything, as good as he could. And I was like, all right, man, but let me pick the day. Let's do this right. Let's pick this day based on, weather and everything. Like, how short a notice can we do here? And anyhow, it worked out that our schedules worked out. The weather worked out. We're out there catching fish. Nothing huge. I mean, probably, 8-10 pounders. He had caught 3 or 4 at that point, and we'd hold the fish, right up to him. They'd be right in his face. He was touching the fish and looking at him and giggling. This kid's like 4 or 5 years old. And it was really, really cool. And where I fish is just downriver from the airport, so we see all kinds of cool aircraft, and I had to keep resisting from pointing things out, because I'm so used to doing that with people. I'd be like, oh, hey, look, there's a such and such, but I'd be like, nope, don't do that, because you can't see it, and had to kind of adjust my thinking and how I presented things to him, let him play with my fish grips and stuff. And I saw this eagle, and it was coming up the river, and dang it. All right. Anyhow, this eagle's coming up the river, and I so badly wanted to, point the eagle out, but like, I knew he wouldn't be able to see it. So I just, put my head down and looking at the rods and looking around the boat and looking at this adorable little boy and everything. And this little boy, he says, "Look, Dad, an eagle." And he points up, and that eagle, it was right above our boat. I mean, full wingspan. Like, it dove down. It did the most beautiful, lowest, slowest fly over our boat. And that kid saw it, and it was awesome. It was so special. So anyhow, that's, as a guide, that was probably one of my most memorable moments. It's like everything just kind of came together to give this kid an experience that hopefully he'll remember forever. That's my story.
That's cool. I'm not crying. You can't see anything behind my glasses. So no, it's those kind of things that in the end, even with all the crap you have to put up with sometime, at least that kind of comes back and makes the full circle to something that's, a full memory and everything. So that's awesome. That's ending on a high note. People want to get a hold of you. How did they do it? What's the easiest way to find you, inquire, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so BreakLineCharters.com, and it's BREAK, BreakLine Charters. Mm-hmm. And if you want to Google me, there's plenty of information to find on me all over the place. Just make sure you spell my name right. So my name is Jaime. It's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. That's messed up all the time. Got to thank Mom and Dad for that one. Keeps me and everyone else on their toes. But yeah, so I'm Jaime Hughes. I'm a captain. It's BreakLine Charters. I also have BreakLine Charters Facebook, Insta, and TikTok. So that's the easiest way to get me goes through the website.
And if you can't find her, forget her, hit me up. Y'all know how to get a hold of me, message and hit me through the website, and I will put you in touch with her, and you can go out and have a good story to share with her. Well, there you go, guys. That was pretty interesting. I told you there was something behind the turds in the river part of that, but she's an interesting captain. Hopefully, at some point, I can get up there and fish with her and film some stuff with her. Any of you folks that are in the Northeast and looking for a charter captain, Jamie's one you need to reach out to. Like I said earlier, I'll have some contact information down in the description. And if you have trouble finding her, hit me up on my website and I'll put you in touch with her. So that's it for now. We'll catch you out on the water.